XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/xswd.
The new Super 35 sensor that Canon have introduced with the C300 Mark III is quite a big step up from other S35 sensors that they have created before. From the body and the flexibility that gives us in terms of the expansion packs and the interchangeable mount, to the sensor with its increased dynamic range for tackling scenes that possibly we couldn't have tackled or captured faithfully before, I can get more out of this camera. My money goes further. It's as simple as that from a business standpoint. From a creative point of view, it's unquestionably unlocking more creative avenues for us as filmmakers.
Hi, Carl here for Pro VTV. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are joined by Craig Heffernan from Blackmagic, who is Blackmagic Technical Sales Director here in the UK. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to talk to us, Craig. It's really, really appreciated.
No, I'm really happy to be here. It's good to get out from the home office.
Yes.
I think we're all feeling a bit locked in.
The first time you've been in the studio for a while, right?
I've not been in the studio for a while, and it's nice to chat and talk to some people and sort of get some real conversation going rather than tapping away on emails, as I tend to spend most of my time at the moment. But thank you for having me as well. Should be good
Almost
fun.
Feels like a trade show.
Well, almost. It's certainly quieter, and I can hear you better than I would at a trade show.
Yeah, good point. We don't have to do this and lean in.
Yeah,
exactly.
And feet don't hurt as much.
So should we start by you introducing yourself a little bit for the people watching this at home, and sort of what your role is at Blackmagic, how long you've been there, and give people a bit of a background, shall we?
Yeah, so I am Technical Sales Director. I'm part of the senior management team for Blackmagic in Europe, Middle East and Africa. And predominantly my role here is I work with a group of product specialists across all of our technologies and all of our market spaces, particularly into live production, into post-production and into digital film, as we're going to talk about today. And with that team, we go out and we work directly with customers of Blackmagic or customers interested in how they can integrate our products and our technologies into their workflows. We do some training. We've done demos in support of resellers like yourselves throughout all of the region. And we also then work with internal sales and some of our other agencies like our marketing team and our PR team in sort of making sure all of the right information, the technical and the operational support is there as well. And another part of my job is around some of our certified training. Whether any of your viewers know or people that follow you, we do a certified training program now for DaVinci Resolve. So I work with a colleague of mine that manages that as part of the global team. And through that, we've built a community of over 200 certified trainers for Resolve throughout our region.
Which is an amazing resource.
Absolutely, yeah. So to put all that into context, my job really is taking that technical information and everything we do. We've got such a broad range of products and technologies now, distilling the information down to how customers need it and understanding, and educating and informing anybody that's interested in Blackmagic products and what we can offer to them. And sort of building all those solutions as we go, whether that's a national broadcaster, features film, or on set with those kind of level of production, all the way down to, quite recently, lots of guys that are doing webcasting or, setting themselves up for the first time, doing the kind of conferencing work. Yeah, absolutely. So we go where the interest is, spend a lot of time working with customers, educating and going from there. So
excellent. So the way that this is going to work today for people watching, we've got a few topics that we want to sort of discuss between me and Craig. So we're going to focus down on the digital cinematography sort of branch of Blackmagic. So the cameras and the Resolve, sort of that area of Blackmagic, rather than say the live production, the multicam, the A10 world. I mean, obviously, if you've got any questions about anything, Craig covers it all. So we can delve and divulge if people want us to go off on a branching topic. But for the most part, keen to keep this into the cinematography realm, if you like. We will just chat back and forward, but I'm very keen to get as many questions from you guys watching at home in there as possible. I can see people already starting to say hi. Video editor bloke saying sitting in the sunshine in a country park with an ice cream and ducks wandering around and still watching the Pro V live stream. Good on you, mate. Thank you very much for still joining us, even when the sun's out.
We find out what ice cream it is.
Yeah, what ice cream is it? Let us know. Let us know. What do you reckon? I reckon a Solero or an ice lolly type
thing. That would be good, yeah. Or does you go classic, like a
good old
choc chip?
99 flake, yeah.
Yeah. So,
right, let's start by going back to the beginning, shall we? How long has Blackmagic been making cameras now?
Well, we're coming around to, it's nearly 9 years since we announced. 10 years, right. Obviously, privately started to develop the products. It was NAB 2012 where Blackmagic entered the camera market space. And I'd been with the business a little bit longer than that. I joined Blackmagic in early 2012. Previous to that, I'd worked in production. and I'd worked in the UK sales channel with customers and resellers. So moving over to Blackmagic and started pretty much straight away into this incredible journey we've been on around digital film.
It's quite a time to start with Blackmagic, isn't it? Just before that kicked off.
And it hasn't slowed. And I remember the NAB 2012 in the South Hall where we have our home at NAB, for anybody that's been there. It was incredible. The swarm and the interest that came into that booth was just mind-blowing for everybody who was there, and certainly my first NAB with the company as well. And it was fantastic. And so we've been in the industry and been in the camera market within the digital film space since then, and grown and grown. And the journey through that has really taught us a lot around the cameras, which will go around the technologies and where we've come from. But at the time, what we were looking at, and our main emphasis around our very first steps in the camera world, was to see about how we could improve upon the options that were available in the market space at the time. If you go back to 2012, we were in a world where, the camera systems from the leaders of our technology in our industry, the Arris, the Sonys and Reds, were notably more expensive, almost elite to a degree in terms of their accessibility. If you came down, you were either making a choice between a product which was more of a video camcorder style, or you were moving into, at that time, the DSLR revolution, where we had like Canon products being used, which were fantastic, 35mm sensors, fantastic lenses. People knew what they could do from a photographic point of view, but maybe from a videography point of view, or maybe cine point of view, those products were a little more lacking than we see today. And our entry into the market was to try and answer some of the frustrations we felt and saw. Blackmagic as a business, prior to diversifying and bringing in digital film cameras, was post-production orientated. And, for a number of years prior to that, we'd concentrated into the post-market space with products like Final Cut, and we were the first company to put SDI on Final Cut and allow you to have low-cost ingest systems in that world. But what we also did is we'd acquired over that period of time, in about 2009, DaVinci Resolve and DaVinci Systems as the company. So we were looking at that camera space, and we were looking at what people were shooting in the digital film market at that time, and seeing a discrepancy, seeing some frustrations where people had great lenses, great sensors in those DSLR products or in some of the video products, but were being let down by MPEG compression, or 8-bit video is still very prevalent, and we hadn't really seen some of the other technical advancements in the codec choices we have. So we set about trying to fill a gap, what we saw, which was an affordable camera technology that had close to Hollywood level quality, something that could offer RAW, which, again, going back 9 years, RAW in the video world was still something that was very, very high end. It wasn't particularly as accessible as it is now. We wanted to address the ability of the dynamic range and how you could manage dynamic range through those cameras, and what that meant in a video sense as you start to increase dynamic range. And because we had DaVinci, because we had Resolve, we approached our camera designs, and we still do to some degree, from the back. What do we take from that camera into post-production, and how do you link your onset and your shoot basically with post-production in mind? They shouldn't be disconnected. They shouldn't have oil and water kind of thinking. So we looked at what we could do in those spaces, and Blackmagic Cinema Camera was the first of its kind. It was incredibly brave step for us.
It's amazing how many of those key core functionality and concepts are still very much the same from that original sort of 2.5K sort of box design in some ways. It was almost like a fat tablet, wasn't it, with a lens mount on the front, and the current pockets, and even the Ursa Mini Pros. The idea of having a camera that prioritizes cinema sort of image quality, that is quite scaled back apart from just the features and just the menu items that you need for that cinematography focus, and the core bit of having both ProRes and RAW there. And sure, it was Cinema D and G back at the launch rather than Blackmagic RAW, which came along later. But that core concept of a camera is still exactly what you're making now, which shows
very much is. To break those things apart, DaVinci and the Resolve software that we have has evolved, and you've seen to where we are today, the color science and the technology and that bridge between camera to post, particularly into DaVinci, into Resolve itself, has strengthened. And we've learned from the color science and through the management of color and what we want to do in terms of reproduction and fidelity in the delivery side, going backwards through the cameras. RAW was always key to us. You can't fully achieve what we would like in reproduction fidelity point of view if you're not working in a RAW or at least a log format. And going back as I say, 9 years ago, we were looking more at seeing 8-bit video, which you can only pull and push around so much from a grading point of view, or in sense as well, some of the codec macro blocking that was in there. And so those technologies, dynamic range is also obviously part of that. That seems to be one that we sort of, many other camera manufacturers will state and achieve increasingly improved dynamic range as the technologies have gotten better. So we've looked at those things, and they've always been at the heart of what we've built around our digital film camera products, is how can you get the best image product off those cameras? What's the lowest compromise? What should you not be accepting from those products? Because ultimately, the people that are purchasing Blackmagic cameras and taking them and using them are delivering to a client, they're delivering to a customer. That could be a drama into a theater or into an audience, or it could be into commercials and corporate world. And the expectations of those customers is of the highest quality. So our intention has always been no compromise. You shouldn't be having a discussion or consideration where you're paying for high quality glass that you might be putting in front of these products, that you're buying a camera system that has, by its technology, a world leading or an incredibly highly capable sensor, but then all of that being, compromised in the back end, the ability that some of the color fidelity is thrown away, maybe some of the image precision has gone, macro blocking or MPEG or any kind of GOP-based recording to be avoided. So yeah, from the start, the minimum we were doing was ProRes, was 10-bit, because it had to be at that broadcast quality level.
Which is quite a minimum. I mean, that's a maximum for nearly every other camera out there on the market.
Yeah, and also we know we entered the camera market where we're not really coming in at a videography level, if you will.
Sure.
And I think as well we've learned everybody around us in the industry, I think in the past 10, 15 years, has learned so much more about these technologies. So we know there's a distinction between videography and cinematography. Sure. And what we want to achieve with them. And you can be both as an operator and as a creative. It depends on what the project is or what your customer or client requires. And there's solutions for them. And what we do is we try to obviously bring those higher technologies that appeal to cinematography, to the filmmaker edge, which we've seen become prevalent since we entered the camera market, to an affordable price with non-proprietary media, nothing that really creates barriers, something that promotes and drives creativity, and that's really the heart of what we try to do. The technology grows and develops. Cinema DMG becomes Blackmagic RAW, which we can obviously spend a bit more time talking about, but at the heart of it, it's about how do you get the best image off your camera, and then how can you finesse and really perfect that in post-production with Resolve itself.
Well, let's chat a bit about Blackmagic RAW, shall we? Before we get onto that, the ice cream that Video Editor Bloke is eating is a vanilla 99, by the way. So I think I got that one right.
The classic, yes.
And Tyler Edwards is just saying that he still loves his Blackmagic Cinema camera 2.5K EF. He has got an Ursa G2 and a 6K Pro, but he still uses the original, the 2.5K.
Had this really nice milky emulsion kind of look to it, very celluloid looking.
Yeah, exactly.
Looked amazing.
Exactly. So Blackmagic RAW, I mean, where did that come from for you guys? Was that something that was in the pipeline for quite a long time?
The development of it really came around, we always look to stress and test elements of the camera design and of that pipeline, if you will. So one of the phrases we've used in thinking about a workflow or even an ecosystem is lens degrade.
Yep.
So thinking about how do you, from the moment light hits the lens and we travel through the camera, and how we're processing that, light information down into data and handling it, encapsulating it, and then passing that through to post. And that's when Resolve technology comes in 32-bit float processing for the actual color maths and all of the work that's going in, color gamut control, or whether you're delivering in HDR, and all the way through to delivery. We're a technology company that I think almost uniquely can look at it in that broader sense.
Absolutely.
So at points, we targeted where we think there's been weaknesses or areas we could improve through all of that chain. And there's notable changes through the cameras through the years. Blackmagic RAW arrived with us in 2018 and had been built internally and tested and stressed, because we knew we were getting to a point where Cinema DNG as a RAW format had started to be more problematic than useful, if that's the best way of putting it. You may remember at the time, Grant, our CEO, described it as a bucket of pixels, which is true. What that format was doing for us was encapsulating as much sensor information as it could into a file format that would work at the time, but it was quite bulky. It wasn't particularly agile in the way that we would then, seeing other alternatives in the market, or we'd made dynamic improvements to that workflow, and then that one was sticking out. So Blackmagic RAW came about through some testing and stress of where we thought we could make the next best improvement. It wasn't to build a proprietary codec. It wasn't to try and lock people into a Blackmagic workflow. And certainly Blackmagic RAW as a codec, the software decoder is free. It's in our SDK for the cameras. It's widely supported in post software or on-set software with a number of our technical partners. But what it did for us is it gave us options about how we could now look at in-camera compression or ratios and choices that gave the camera operator a way of looking at how he wanted to work on the particular shoot or with a particular project. And then using Blackmagic RAW, it had some variance. Cinema DNG didn't. That's the file, that's what you're going to get. 11 mega frame or whatever the data rate was.
It had some very well-known limitations. I mean, the workflow was a bit of a pain with Cinema DNG for a number of reasons. I mean, the first is obviously the way that the physical files looked and behaved. It's a folder full of essentially JPEG images and separate little images. Exactly, image sequence format. The other one is just playback speed. It was difficult for a computer and for software like Resolve to churn through. And I guess that must be one of the main key strengths that I think people don't often talk about with Blackmagic RAW, is because you make Resolve as well, you can really optimize that performance in terms of playback speed. Because it's all very well and good on the high end, but at the sort of the middle end of the market where your cameras are so popular, speed is so important, and we're often working on a laptop or a simple iMac or something like that, and so not having to use proxy workflows is so beneficial.
Yeah, it had to be something that was, I guess, agile is the word. It could adapt to the way that you were working. If you go back to the cinema cameras and then into the first pocket cameras and onwards, in those first 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years of the development around the products, we looked at it as that you could shoot in RAW or you could shoot in ProRes. We had this middle option, which was encapsulating it in a ProRes codec, but we had a film extended mode. So it would effectively be a log format in a ProRes encapsulation. So it allowed you to not bake in color gamut detail in the camera as you recorded, but you got the benefits of ProRes, which is a very widely accepted codec. It's neat, it's clean, but you at least had a little bit of flexibility away from, say, something that would have Rec 709 baked in. Taking that thought forward, what we've done with Blackmagic RAW, and there's information on our website if you wanted to look at the comparisons, Blackmagic RAW's data rates for the resolutions you're working at pretty much map out about where you'd find other codecs like ProRes or DNX. But the difference being it's 12-bit. It's a 16-bit linear down to a 12-bit file. And the way that it works as a as a codec system is very different as well. The Grant does a demo that's on our video where he talks about how it works. You know, a raw system basically takes everything the sensor gives you and drops it into a file format. You then choose to demosaic that in post-production and apply the color gamut that you want to and how you want to work. A video codec, say ProRes with Rec 709, bakes that information in at the point of recording, and then you're set. And then when you move into post, you can tweak and play around in some of the edges of what that color gamut would allow, but not a lot of work. What we do with Blackmagic Raw is it creates its agility by being customized to the camera it's being used on. And what I mean by that is, while we record and we capture that image detail information, we capture the luminance and the chrominance information, we also sensor profile the camera. So we know what the particular mosaic is, or the CFA of the camera that is being used. Sensor information travels as metadata in the file. And so there's some in-camera processing to help with the color fidelity and reproduction. But when you take Blackmagic Raw across to DaVinci Resolve and then work with it and demosaic it and finish that work in Resolve, DaVinci knows what that camera should look like.
Yep.
So with each of the Blackmagic cameras, the differences in the sensor is understood by the workflow. And we've taken that a step further. So Blackmagic Raw is now supported in our video assist products for guys like Nikon have announced recently, and Panasonic, that they have Blackmagic Raw through their raw output into our video assist tools. And we've had it previously with the Panasonic EVA 1 was one of the first ones. Mm-hmm. What we've done there is we've worked with those camera manufacturers about how their sensor works and behaves, profiled that into the codec, and then Resolve knows this was shot on a Nikon Z1 or it was shot on a Ursa Mini Pro G2, and we know what that difference would be in the color science of the product as well.
I think that communication between the codec and the camera that it's actually being recorded on is something that a lot of people miss online. I've seen a lot of discussion about Blackmagic Raw focusing on it being open source or not, and so therefore whether just any camera manufacturer can stick it in their cameras or not. And I think that's a topic that is very complicated. There's a lot going on there. But fundamentally, you guys, as the people that make the codec, do need sensor information and image pipeline information from the camera that it's being put into. Somebody can't put it in their camera without having a communication with you and sharing some information backwards and forwards, presumably, right?
Yeah, that's effectively from an oversight point of view. That's how it works. The software decoder is in the SDK. So, and we have it in Resolve. We have it in the Blackmagic Raw player, so you can actually install our player system as well. And that would allow you, if you're using Blackmagic Raw on set or off a laptop, even with the 12K camera, the Ursa Mini Pro 12K, the Raw player can scale that down and play back at 4K, or allow you to run 12K files on a optimized laptop within it. That decoder is also in software like Premiere Pro and Media Composer.
And that's Avid. How? Because it's in that SDK.
Yeah, so they can just pick it up from the SDK. We have a developer team that will work with them if they need any help from a coding point of view.
But
so that's on the back.
They can just do it themselves if they want to.
And use it, yeah. Yep. And we have a whole development and technical partners initiative that we work on a different side of the business. But when it comes around to camera support, that's where we would, it's open in a sense of camera manufacturers out there that would like to see Blackmagic Raw as an option for their customers. We're open to a conversation around it. As far as I know how that process goes, we just need to work on a hardware engineering point of view to create that understanding, make sure that we're taking the precision that camera offers into our video assist products. And I guess, doing right by that owner of the product, that they get the best looking image from that third-party camera through Blackmagic Raw.
Sure. So that the codec and Resolve knows what to do with it. So we've got a couple of people talking about Blackmagic Raw in chat. So Nathan's saying he loves Blackmagic Raw, started using his Pocket 4K more than the Ursa Mini 4.6K, and eventually sold the Ursa for the 6K Pro and has no regrets, which is touching a little bit on something we're going to discuss in a minute about the differences between the lines, but that's quite interesting. Glebe's got a question which you've sort of already answered, but he says it's Blackmagic. Is Blackmagic RAW the true 12-bit RAW, or is it debyered to 10-bit? Curious to know if its benefits do outweigh ProRes 444 or even 422 for speed. So I guess that's sort of two questions. There's the demosaicing and debayering process, which you've already discussed on a little bit, and it does a bit of a half and half, right? It sort of does half in camera, half in post.
Yeah, we do what's something's called a partial demosaic in camera. So again, if there's a broader explanation of this on our website where we talk about how the blocks of that processing through the camera and from visual information to data is processed. Mm-hmm. But the description that we have for it is partial demosaic. So we're using inside of our cameras, we build in FPGAs. So we've got a lot of processing power inside the product. So in real time, we can, within the codec, using and understanding what the sensor profile is, start to understand how we're going to package up that chrome lens information. It is 12-bit information, and then that file writes out into the Blackmagic RAW BRAW file. When we pull that over to DaVinci Resolve, Resolve then steps in and then would apply the color gamut that you want to. So the options in Resolve where you choose the color information you want to work with, or the profile, completes that step. So the color and the filing or the finalization of the demosaicing is done in the software. So there's a link between camera and post. So for us, the difference, again, as I say, RAW tends to be take whatever the camera gives you and you do all of that work in post-production, which can be very time consuming, very heavy in terms of GPU processing.
You lose the speed.
Not dynamic necessarily for people that want to maybe, work and get products out quickly or have the time really to sit and pile through color information and do that profiling, or want to go into heavy grade or technical work.
It's like you said at the beginning, it's about being agile and adaptable to all levels of the industry, whether it's high end and the pure quality, or whether it's mid to low end where you need to also work very fast by yourself.
Absolutely that, yeah. So it's adding in, it's kind of trying to create a hybrid between the efficiencies that we've seen in other codec systems, ProRes notably the most used in the industry, but without throwing away that color information. One of the key things, as I say, we went from that first camera in 2012, the key emphasis in all of our camera design is about color reproduction and the precision of what we get. Skin tones or the saturation, the subtleties and nuances of color have to come through the camera system. And within that as well, there's a part of the technology which is Blackmagic Color Science. And we're on Gen 5 Color Science, which is in our Ursa Mini 12K and the 6K Pro from the Pocket series of products. And again, that's gone up in iterations. And that's really, again, how we're creating our curve and working off the camera into Resolve to retain as much color information from camera, and then how we put that into precision and the color fidelity and reproducing it in DaVinci itself. That's how it works from an overview point of view. There's stages within there that are better described by our engineers or possibly by the video that's on our website. But yeah.
Cool. So we've got another question from Gaula, but much more specific question, which we'll just answer real quickly. But he says, it's not related to the main topic, but I'd like to purchase a Blackmagic Video Assist 7-inch 12G soon. Do you have any information about supporting the Canon EOS R Blackmagic RAW recording? Now, they haven't enabled RAW out. So if a camera doesn't enable RAW out over one of their outputs, whether it's HDMI or SDI, there's nothing you guys can do, right?
No, it's again going back to that profiling and the way that we work with the camera that we're attached to, so to speak. We need to know what the characteristics are of that product. We want to know what the lens is, and we profile it. So it does have to go through a qualification stage, and our engineers would support that, as we saw with the Panasonic announcement recently with their S1H.
Yep.
We were part of some work with those guys. Our engineers working with their team to build Blackmagic RAW support for their RAW output. It isn't something we could just add in as camera manufacturers release new products. Our codec doesn't work in that way. Sure. But it's open. I'd say if you're looking at if you want Blackmagic RAW on those camera systems, make a lot of noise in those camera forums and communities from that manufacturer, and they can give us a call, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, Organism X is saying here, let Fujifilm know that Blackmagic RAW is what their customers need. So there's requests from Canon, from Fuji. I mean, pretty much any camera on the market, people would love to pair it with a video assist. But right now, with one of those brands, you just, because they don't even have a RAW output to begin with, let alone a RAW output, which is then talk to you guys to work with Blackmagic RAW. There's a bit of a way to go just now, and so you will still be able to record on a video assist with those cameras. It will just be ProRes rather than Blackmagic RAW.
Yeah, and hopefully we can see that grow and develop, and certainly we have over the past 12 months. We've seen more camera partners approaching us, and we've been really pleased to announce the ones that we support, and hopefully that can continue.
So one quick question on the Resolve side of things before we move on to cameras, because I do want to move on to cameras pretty soon. Noah Elevator Studios just popped up with a question on Fusion. He says, any word on the development of Fusion? I feel it's really underestimated and could easily become better than other top VFX software, but in order to achieve it, it would need much more love from Blackmagic. Fusion pretty much does get a bit of an update in every single release of Blackmagic, of Resolve that comes out, right? But yeah, I mean, it's not the core part of Resolve yet.
Yeah, you picked the weakest part of my knowledge in Resolve as well, coming from a picture
and mine, I'm afraid, although I'm not great on Fairlight either.
I was never a VFX guy, and I'm hugely jealous of their creativity.
Absolutely.
I would say that within the acquisition of Ion, and when we brought that family into the Blackmagic company, we've retained people that worked with Ion, that were central to the development of Fusion in its first life, if you want. And that continues. So you're absolutely right. When we do product release and updates across Resolve, you will see that it will have notes in the edit, in the grade, in Fairlight for the digital audio and Fusion. So it isn't forgotten necessarily. I think the fair point might be there's been a lot more development we've focused on around 16 and 17 recently, which have introduced things like the cut page, which was key for us as Resolve being adopted more and more in non-linear. And we've done a lot of work around Fairlight, so that the digital audio engine and the interface and the UI and some of the tools and customization in Fairlight have stepped up to where we want that product to be. Fusion, again, my lack of familiarity probably with that set and that tool set and the work that's done there, I can't really be specific other than we know there's been incremental changes to it. But it's an area we're aware of. There's a lot of growing interest around Fusion, both as a VFX tool, in the studio version or in the free version, because it's still very powerful for things like wire removal or keying or set extensions in the free versions, which for multi-seat agencies would be a fantastic choice and a cost benefit, all the way through to on the Fusion on the higher end, where it's being used across network rendering services. And there's still a lot of work that goes on around that. What my work brings me to, as I said at the beginning, is how we're training operators. So a lot of concentration I'm looking at the moment, and then feeding back to the development team, is we have people interested in learning Fusion coming from other VFX platforms, and there might be some tools missing or something that could be done quicker or more efficiently, and we feed that information back to the development team. They know what they would like to add from a software point of view, or following the trends and technologies on the VFX market in their software. We talk about operation and that user base level. So there is development around Fusion, but I think, in fairness, Resolve being such a broad sort of village of products, it is one that's maybe been third or fourth in the list in the past couple of versions. But I wouldn't say it's something we've forgotten about or don't really want to share any love in. Its day in the spotlight will come, I'm sure.
I mean, it's great that it's a suite within one piece of software. I mean, the fact that you've got full editing software, full grading software, full audio software, and full visual effects software, and full compression software. People often forget about the delivery side of it as well. You can use Resolve just simply to transcode footage from one format to the other, and it does just as good a job of it as any of the other options out there on the market. And so it's a very complete suite of video production tools, all within one app, that is out there for free. So
it's incredible. It's difficult to call it the free version. I think of it as a free version. It doesn't time bomb. It doesn't have it has some limitations. So you won't do extended GPU acceleration or support. Noise reduction isn't available in the non-studio version. Network rendering and a number of other collaborative tools, and neural engine, which is new in studio to do a lot of the AI work. They're not in the non-studio version, but it's a very competent element of software. We've spoken previously about how facilities that are built around DaVinci Resolve will have hero suites or they'll have studio licenses throughout, but still in ingest stations or very offline or in side areas, they'll use the non-studio version because it has what's needed. Another in education as well, again, doing a lot of work around film students and the next generation of creatives that come into our industry. It's brilliant for them. When I was back in university studying film production, I was learning on media composer systems that were, 6 figures costs, and I couldn't take my work home with me. The benefits and the capability of a young creative now can try DaVinci Resolve, and it's a Hollywood standard piece of software. From a grading point of view, the prestige that DaVinci Systems had was retained, and what we've done there is released a product that cost, notably £500,000 for a Resolve system 10 years ago, or 11, 12 years ago when we bought DaVinci Systems, is now free. It ties into that thinking and that ethos that we have, which is the accessibility of these technologies, and what we can do to sort of encourage and push along that creative space. But try Resolve. It is massively powerful.
And there's no reason not to. It's free.
Absolutely.
Just try
Best
it.
price possible.
Absolutely.
And then when you realize it doesn't have that one thing you need, you call Pro AV and buy the studio version, of course.
Now, talking of one thing that you need, it's not something that we're going to be able to help with, but Edward has literally just put on chat any hints if ProRes RAW is ever going to come to Resolve. Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it's one that we get frequently, and if we were on trade show floors doing Resolve demos, we get asked about it because there's evidently a good user base out there. As far as I know, it's still one that's under consideration, and the DaVinci Resolve team were looking at it. As you'll accept as well, as a business, the small number of software engineers we have with Resolve have put hundreds of software updates into version 17, which came out of beta into public release only about 3 weeks ago. So it was presumably something that's on their list to consider, but we haven't made a commitment, or I haven't heard particularly anything that would confirm it as yet.
Sure. Well, before we move on to the next topic, I'd like to add my list to the petition to get it in there. It would be very useful.
Noted.
Cool. So let's talk about cameras. I've got here right in front of me the Pocket 6K Pro, the new one, and then we've also got the 12K Ursa Mini Pro. There we go. That's not the 12K, that's the Pocket. But the 12K, I mean, those are the two newest cameras, really. And it's very interesting to see what you're doing at sort of either end of the camera lineup, because you've pushed the previous either end. You had the normal Pockets, and then you had the Ursa Mini Pro G2, and you sort of pushed both the Pocket line and the Ursa Mini Pro line just up that little bit in terms of the capabilities.
Yeah, and they're two very different beasts as well, with very different core technologies and kind of intentions behind them. The 12K product is obviously our flagship camera system. We announced that at the end of summer last year. That went into the hands of a number of seeders and tech testers for us, including high-end DOPs that work on Hollywood features.
Sure.
That were happy to test it out and try it, and we went through a really great phase of feedback. That camera itself is technically innovative and different to some of the other products that we have in the market space. It's one that's raised eyebrows as well. Notably,
Absolutely.
Why do I need 12K?
Why do I need 12K? There's the whole new sensor design. There's the frame rates as well. There's a lot about that camera, especially considering to look at it. It's the same body style as the original G2, and so looking at it is quite interesting. We've got a little show reel of footage which we could actually play. Do you want to explain a little bit what this is and where it's come from the 12K footage? I think it's from a creative agency, right?
It is, yes. So a number of 12K projects that we're working on are a little bit longer in length, or we won't necessarily have media we can share from them
Sure.
so quickly. Really, in 6 months, that product really being in the hands of these people. But we work with a number of agencies as well that are keen to test our technology. And this is a UK-based agency that works predominantly in automotive and fashion. And they shot a test reel for us. They're working on a project at the moment with another automobile manufacturer to shoot commercials. And they've used Resolve for a while. They're attracted to our cameras because of that workflow and the link from post into the cameras. They've shot with Pocket. They've shot with the G2 product in the past. And as soon as we could get them a 12K, they snapped it off us. And unbeknownst to us, they put together a really quick little test show reel, really, that talks about the quality that you can get from 12K down into 4K delivery.
I mean, it's hard to think of this as a camera test. It certainly looks a darn sight better than my camera tests do.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, their commercial work is astounding. Some of their creative stuff is brilliant. And some of the images they provided us in a really short period of time, we were blown away by.
Let's give it a watch, shall we? Some pretty cool stuff there.
Yeah, I can't do that with a camera.
I can't do that with a camera either, mate. Don't worry.
No, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I mean, what they were looking to exploit there, and what we've obviously the work to explain and build people's attention about the 12K is that we weren't building a camera for 12K delivery. It's not a format that people are looking for. Our intention, our design with this camera, particularly with the new sensor, was how could we build the best camera for 4K?
Yeah.
And within that, and within our engineering teams, we looked at the options we had available around the sensor designs and previous point I made about Blackmagic Raw being something that came in and addressed part of that workflow. The next bit we looked at, moving almost through the camera technology, was the sensor. And one of the things we wanted to look at, and again, thinking about color, capturing color information, retaining image and highlight detail, and then color reproduction at the further end back out through Resolve, was looking at the sensor. And with a Bayer sensor, which is standard in CMOS technology and used throughout other camera systems, you have certain, again, compromises in the way that mosaic would behave, with a 2:1 color ratio. So the sensor that we looked at and we put into the 12K is a symmetrical RGB sensor. So this works differently to a Bayer. It creates a uniform 1:1:1 sample in terms of RGB color information, and then allows us across that 12K sensor in the scale of the resolution that we have there to capture an incredible amount of color information in uniform. What we're not doing is relying on certain elements in luminance to create color and work in that way.
Yeah.
So it gives us another step forwards where we speak about precision, color fidelity, the nuances that we can capture through cameras in digital film technologies around the sensor. So, and then from that, naturally, as we were building out, how do you do a sensor around that kind of technology at 4K, it grew to be a 12K camera based on pixel count and the technology. And then likewise, we know this is an emerging market, particularly at the top end. We have a camera now that can even deliver into 4K, 8K. So you have in there a lot of choices around how you want to approach future proofing, or if you're shooting theatrical 8K or 8K for VFX, there's a load of different avenues or platforms you can take this camera into for its applicational uses.
And I guess the higher resolution is sort of an inherent result of that sensor design, because you are capturing full RGB information rather than for each sort of pixel rather than the debye process. You're going to end up with more pure resolution because of that, right? It's sort of, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, the maths pushes us out at that resolution by design. As you design out the CFA, and it arrives approximating out to 12K in terms of where we are with that resolution itself. It means that format with the camera in the performance it offers, it's a super 35mm profile. As you said as well, it uses the Ursa Mini Pro body, which is a tried and tested platform for us. One of the only hardware engineering change in there relating to the sensor was some work around the heat dissipation and the management of that from a different sensor. But the design of the RGB, wanting to perform and what we could push and achieve as a 4K delivery, meant that we had to go way above anything else we'd done before. The 4.6K sensor or the 6K sensor that's in the Pocket products give us oversampling for resolution. So image fidelity or precision in image detail is there in the resolution. When you scale that down, we know what we're going to do. The 12K goes way beyond anything that we've considered before. Even if you're pushing that down to 8K, 12K as close to over 100 megapixels is an incredible amount of image information.
And in a lot of my discussions with customers about this, I've almost sort of tried to steer them away from the 12K aspect of the camera, because to me that's not really the main real world tangible benefit of this sensor. This is a sensor that has given us, because of its different design, two big features for me which no other camera has really done on the market at all, and that is the combination of high resolution and high frame rates. It can do, like, where's the tech specs page? So we
can do 12K at 60.
And 12K at 75 if you crop down to a widescreen, which is so high. 8K at 120 or 4K up to 240 frames a second. We're only just hitting 120 frames a second in 4K in most of the other cameras out there, as a much more common feature now, and yet you're going up to 240 frames a second and doing the same frames a second in 8K rather than 4K, 4 times the pixels.
There's 3 ways you can approach this camera and think about how you want to use it. And I think that, again, that flexibility that we offer to the camera operator about what do they want to achieve, what's the shot, is there action in there that needs higher frame rate, or is it something like a beauty shot where they want 12K or they need the detail. And there's really kind of, boiling it down, 3 ways you can approach. You can shoot and use the camera in full 12K. And within that comes, the trade-off being higher data rate and higher files that you'll need to take then through to post, because it's 12K. A terabyte of storage, 25 frames a second at Blackmagic RAW 8.1, which is about middle of the codec's ability, will give you about 45 minutes worth of recording. So they're big files because they're 12K, but what you have there is everything the camera offers in terms of resolution, color reproduction. So it is the very best that we can do in our camera performance, and pushing the technical capability of anybody's offerings in this market space. With that comes a decision if you're going to then scale down to 8K or 4K, you're doing that in post. The other option that you have is the camera will do in-camera sensor scaling. So you could choose to shoot in-camera 8K or 4K. The benefit here is they're not center cut. So
this is the other that's the other feature that I was just mentioning then, in terms of the big advantages. As far as my knowledge goes, I don't believe there is another sensor on the market which can capture RAW in various resolutions without having to crop in and out of the sensor size. The two, uncropped in different resolutions and RAW capture, just don't go together. And this RGB sensor seems to be the way that you guys have enabled that, because it's so useful. Nobody wants to change sensor size unless they have to.
No, absolutely. And then if you wanted to get the efficiency, you don't want to shoot in 12K because of those data rate file sizes. You want to shoot at 4K. It doesn't center cut, so we're not talking about having to calculate out crop factors and what's the effect of my focal range on my preferred lenses, you get the same field of view across the full width of that sensor.
Absolutely.
Into a 4K frame. And we're not pixel binning either off the sensor. So what you're not doing is you won't see any of the inherent issues that we see with that kind of in-sensor processing. We use the technology of the sensor, the performance and the actual computing power in the camera, and then Blackmagic RAW as the encapsulating codec to mean that you can have that choice. So you can shoot full 12K, full frame, or you can go down into those in-sensor scales, but without any kind of focal or optical compromisation. The third option is when we do center cut. So there is a 16mm mode, super 16mm mode built into the camera. You are then cutting down into a roughly 6K frame in the center of the sensor itself. And then to your point about frame rates, that's where we see them go up even higher, and we're achieving 240 frames a second in 4K if you cut in, because again, you know, we're giving the camera a trade-off and allowing it to run that frame rate faster by using a smaller portion of the sensor.
So Barathi is just asking in chat for clarification there. He says, can we expect 120 frames a second recording with the full sensor readout like we get in 12K? And yeah, absolutely. You know, so 12K up to 60 frames a second, 8K up to 120, and 4K up to 120 you can do using the full width of the sensor. And then cropping into that Super 16 mode that Craig just mentioned, you get 6K up to 120 and then 4K up to 240. So all of these frame rates here that you can see on the top sort of section of their frame rates on their tech specs website, you're doing that with the full width of the sensor, which is, like I say, unheard of really when you're talking about raw capture. And you do only get raw capture in this camera, right? There's no ProRes or anything like that because of the way the sensor works.
It's Blackmagic RAW. So that link that we have from lens through grade is strengthened with this camera. The technologies intertwine. So the way that we allow this camera to work and the color reproduction, the speed and the performance that allows us to achieve those frame rates are linked to those stages. So it's Blackmagic RAW in this product.
That enables that.
That reason.
Do you think there is ever any possibility of getting ProRes in it, even at a lower frame rate, or is it they're just two technologies incompatible?
I don't know fully whether that's something we would consider for this camera. There would be then some compromises potentially in the way that particularly ProRes would work compared to Blackmagic RAW. Our technology and our ownership of those technologies and the IP that sits behind us allows us to engineer something that's very streamlined and achieves those levels we want. I couldn't say what it would be, and I couldn't comment whether that's anything we would definitely see or not. I just don't know. But it would be a different camera because of the choice you're making with the codec.
Sure.
I'd just say to put into context as well as to why would you have those options in camera. A discussion I was having with a production company that was shooting an action film or had a feature that would have action sequences and fight sequences in it. Their approach was that they would deliver theatrically for 4K. They could master in 8K if they wanted to. But for tests and some of the work they were doing, they could go up to 8K for hero shots or beauty shots. But with the right lenses and the right planning and blocking out of a scene, they could put the camera into the center cut mode and shoot their fight scenes at higher frame rates at 4K up to 240 frames a second. So there's a huge appeal for them that this camera had that versatility to on day one be shooting 12K beauty or images they could master into 8K. Or they could go into the 4K higher frame rate stuff if they were delivering into 4K for digital theatrical release.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't get that in any other camera. You've got to change camera systems to go to some slow-mo work. And sure, it's not full Phantom Flex levels of sort of slow motion, but it's enough for most things, especially action scenes like you're just talking about there. And it's quite easy to forget sometimes that this is in a camera that costs what it does, because this is a $7,500 camera exFAT. Yeah. This isn't a 30 grand, 40 grand camera that we're talking about here. This is, sure, it is the most expensive camera that you've ever made, right? I'm not missing anything there, am I? But it's still, in the big scheme of the cameras that we sell here at ProEV, one of the mid-range priced ones, easily.
It is, and again, our intention isn't necessarily to see how much revenue or how much profit we can make from the technology we put out into the world. It's about the affordability. It's about the accessibility of it. I mean, once you rig that camera out with batteries or any particular kit or rigging that you want to do,
Sure.
the price of the product as a platform could be £20,000. And then,
especially if you
for
put some
me,
Supreme Primes on it, like you have done in there in your photo.
And for me, that's probably the right way around. You should be spending the most of your budget on good glass, because that's where you can go wrong very quickly. So our intention with all of our products, whether it's across the 8M line in live production or anything we do, facility class, is affordability. And we put our price point at where we think it, obviously we're a business and there's a need for us to charge. We can't give the cameras away for free, but we can the software. But it's something then becomes accessible and hopefully attractive for people as well. And the thought being with that, if you look at production costs, from a creative point of view, other camera systems might cost 2 or 3 times the price. When you look at a Blackmagic alternative, there's no compromise in the image quality, but you can creatively change the way you think. And now you can shoot with 2 or 3 cameras. We're not saying necessarily you'd spend less budget, but you could start thinking about how you spend some of that budget to improve what you have in your arsenal.
Right, I want to get onto the Pocket 6K because I'm conscious that we're running out of time a little bit, and I'm pretty sure we could talk about this sort of stuff for hours and hours on end, which obviously we don't have. So the 6K Pro brings actually quite a lot of what you've been giving people in the Ursa Mini Pro lineup. I mean, obviously it doesn't have any of the stuff we've just been talking about with the 12K, but if you look at the Ursa Mini Pro G2, the 4.6K one, what made that camera what it was its high resolution sensor, good dynamic range, built-in NDs, built-in XLRs, things like that. And now we've got pretty much all of those in a pocket camera. I think it's a big step forward for you guys in this entry-level range.
Absolutely. If you remember, we had the original Pocket HD, which was pretty much like iPhone size. It was micro Four Thirds.
That was actually a pocket camera. This is not a pocket camera. Let's be honest.
It's not a pocket, right? Big pocket. But the notion was that we changed out those technologies when we introduced the Pocket camera 4K. Then we introduced the 6K, and the difference being the resolution. It was also micro Four Thirds or a 4/3 sensor compared to Super 35 with an EF mount. The Pro is the third in that range that arrived to kind of step up again. And what it offers is it's the same sensor, it's the same core technology as the 6K product, but we looked at operability. The feedback and the complaints to some degree in the product that we had in the 6K brought us to an area where we wanted to look really about how we could define or make the best pocket camera, the best versatile handheld product that was out there, built on that foundation that we had with the 4K and the 6K themselves, which have been hugely successful. So the changes in there are directly linked to customer feedback, what we saw the most from customers when we've spoken to them. I love the product, but could you think of this? So you have a HDR screen. So in bright light environments, you can see and manage and control things like focus. It tilts. It's not fully articulated because of, again, the design of our camera body really wouldn't lend itself to be fully articulated. But most of the customers I spoke to don't really need that. They just want the tilting capability so they can pitch it accordingly.
It just needs not to be fixed, really. I mean, having a fixed screen becomes awkward. Just being able to tilt it out like that, I find myself using it like that pretty much all of the time.
Yeah, exactly, because you're holding it and balancing it in an underslung position.
Or it's on a tripod and I'm standing sort of over it.
Yeah, the EVF comes in again because that was lacking on that particular on the Pocket cameras to date. The EVF is only on the Pro, so it attaches to that customized mount on the product.
And to me, it's a must-have accessory. If anyone at home is watching this and they're not sure whether it's worth the money to go for this now that you've got a high bright screen, to me, it is so worth the money, particularly if you work handheld like this.
Yeah, I find as well when you hold, because you're bracing into yourself as you're holding the camera to use the EVF, that you feel more rigid and stable. Yeah, when you're working with
it shows in your footage as well, and because got quite a nice amount of friction to it. It doesn't flop all over the place. So you really can use it to push against yourself there to stabilize the footage really nicely.
And it's a really good, and the monitor in there as well, an OLED, and the
Sure.
color precision of it is really nice as well. So it's a high quality product that you can, you add. And I would say it's something that, is a need to have on most of the products. Then from an operability point of view, we've also obviously got the ND filters that are built in. We saw, as you said, we saw this on the Ursa Mini, on the G2 product, and the rotary NDs were put on. These are articulated, so there's an electronic control on the back, and it's just there for what we know what we want to use NDs for. You're not having to screw NDs on. You don't have to use variable systems that might give you inconsistencies. So it just adds to the speed and the functionality. If you're a handheld operator, the format and the body size of the camera means you're probably in and around crowds, or you're shooting a particular style of shot, and you don't have time to stop maybe. So the NDs in there are a fantastic addition to just sort of push that along.
So I'm not going to be able to answer everyone's questions, unfortunately, because we are going to run out of time a little bit here. The two biggest areas that I'm seeing questions on, just to generalize things, are about future camera designs and potentials there with sensor size and stuff like that, and about issues with the 6K Pro. So there's a couple of notable ones right now that customers are facing, the biggest one of which being the sort of cool tint on the LCD screen. Are we able to say anything on that, and is it something that you guys are looking at and aware of?
Yeah, we're aware of it. It's not on all cameras, so there's some work going on to identify how that's got through manufacturing. So it isn't on all products. If you were to purchase a product, obviously let you guys know, and then we can take it from there.
Sure.
In terms of rectification, the camera engineering team are aware of it, and we're putting together a firmware update that should be with us shortly, that can update the camera, recalibrate the LCD, and would rid us of that particular problem if anybody has it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, people do. I've seen it mentioned several times. Well, for a start, this camera I'm holding here has it, and I've seen it mentioned quite a few times throughout the chat, including just now from Giacomo. Says, is there a plan to address it? The other main thing about future cameras I'm seeing people talk about a lot are there's physical design, about a box sort of design, I guess similar to what you guys have been doing with the micro cinema camera and micro studio camera, but maybe not quite as micro, a bit bigger. And about sensor size, are you going to carry on with micro four thirds? Are you going to move to full frame? And I know we can't talk about future products, but what do you think either of those things fit with the Blackmagic sort of mentality and ethos?
Again, look, I can't comment on items or products that might be in development, because they could be a period of time away,
Sure.
and somebody will come and pull me immediately away from the studio.
We'll just see the stream go.
Yeah, exactly. No, but what I would say is that we do listen to customer feedback. We're very, very keen as we've developed. We've only been in the camera market and working in digital film since 2012.
Sure.
And for us, we want to be an open technology and an innovating company, but we can't assume that we know all of what is needed through ourselves. We listen very carefully to customers from high-end DOPs and through broadcast into professional and creative spaces. So we do listen. The development of cameras to come, we always look for where we can make the best advantages, or we can change frustrations that people might have with systems that are out there. We look at where we can kind of fill in gaps. Modular sizing or what the particular design of those products would be, I can't really say. We have an industrial design team which is award-winning and incredible in what they do, but I couldn't say whether it was going to be a particular style of camera. What we do look at as well, sort of maybe on the sensor side, is where is the demand and the growth, where is the appetite and the need. So full frame at the moment, still it seems to be a relatively niche area. It's a very particular high-end technology, similar to where we were with the DSLRs. We're adopting a photography approach, or photography sensor sizes, full 35 into our world. And a number of directors or DOPs I've spoken with, they're kind of happy with Super 35. It's such a industrial standard. We know where we are with the lenses we're using. As that matures or changes, as let's say the cost of entry for lenses matches where we are at the cost of entry to our camera products, it would be something we would certainly consider and move towards. But it isn't something I can necessarily say yes or no to right now. What we do look at is where can we add value or an option for the customers that want to see those technologies over the time.
What about Micro Four Thirds? I mean, I think the release of the 6K Pro has got some people that own the 4K version, or even the older cameras like the original pocket cameras and the micro ones, sort of worried that the Super 35 pocket is the one that you guys are going to be favouring from now on, and sort of leaving Micro Four Thirds behind a bit. Do you think that's the case, or is Micro Four Thirds very much still part of the picture for Blackmagic?
I think it is. Yeah, Micro Four Thirds as a platform, as a format, has massive advantages. Super 35 and the EF, obviously what we're looking at is a bigger market space in terms of lenses that are available and users. But Micro Four Thirds as a format, if you want, isn't something that we're leaving behind. If what you'll see as well, if as we update and improve the camera products through time, the camera updates that we bring out, if it was incremental improvements across image, if it was a new variant of Blackmagic Raw, if there was something else that we would add, it would fall into all three cameras. We wouldn't isolate or only look at the Pro as the newest product and leave anybody behind. We would always bring that family of products forward based on the models that are in the range. So we would commit to that.
So just to quick fire through a couple more questions before we wrap up. So Frank is asking, can additional IR cut filters be used with the 6K Pro? Yes, absolutely. You can still put a matte box on the front, screw filters on with a photography thread, whatever way you want to be putting more additional filters on. And yeah, if the internal ND filters aren't cutting enough IR for you, then yeah, absolutely, you can use ones on the front instead. Richard is asking, has got a great idea actually, it's something I've spoken about in some videos before, saying, do you have any plans to make an EVF cable for mounting it to a rig, for a shoulder rig, for example? So just taking it off. It obviously uses this pin connection, which is a proprietary thing. I think there's definitely appetite for some way of sticking it here on the side.
We've done a series of webinars recently across Europe, introducing the product and talking about the technology. That is probably in the top 3 requests. Really? So yeah, we've told our Australian colleagues that are responsible for the design to seriously consider that as an option. So let's see.
I think it would be great, because I mean, having it on top of the camera really helps for stability when you're working handheld. And I think if you've got it handheld like that, that's absolutely where you want it to be. But the minute you put it on a shoulder rig, I mean, obviously it doesn't work anymore. So it really would expand how useful that EVF is for people. I think it's a great idea. The Tony Tech also asked, how come there's no dual native ISO on the Ursa Mini range? How come that's a pocket only thing for you guys?
The sensor technology in those two products were developed independently. So the 4.6K sensor was the very first sensor Blackmagic designed. We obviously don't make them, we're not a silicons company, but it was the first one that we custom built for what we needed. We then stepped into the dual ISO products, the 4K and the 6K, to suit the EF and the Micro Four Thirds platforms on those pocket products. And then the next sensor that came along was the 12K, which I'll be fair to our hardware engineers, it would be a bit of a push to make that dual ISO, I think.
I think they had enough going on their plates with that 12K sensor, didn't they? Poor engineers.
Yeah, it's more if you imagine the time and the roadmap of how we've developed sensor technology, the dual ISO came after the 4.6K that you currently find in the G2 product. What comes next in terms of sensor development may or may not look at dual ISO. We know it's something that's incredibly practical and useful for customers out there. So it'll always be considered, but that's the reason why the 4.6K is actually now a sensor that's, I think, around 5 years old from our point of view in terms of when we first deployed it into a system.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think let's wrap up there, because I'm conscious that we've gone over time a little bit. If I haven't answered any of your questions out there, I am very sorry. If you put any questions that you really want answered in the comment section on this video, once it's available to watch after the fact on YouTube, we can answer them as time goes on there. Sure. So that's a good place to get questions like that. Or of course, just get in touch and get in touch with the Pro AV team. We can pass any questions on to the team over at Blackmagic and see if we can get you any answers. But yeah, for now, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today, Craig.
That was fantastic. I enjoyed that. It was good fun and awesome to have a chat and a conversation around Blackmagic, not just a particular product or a particular workflow for a change.
It's nice to take a step back every now and again and just look at the range, look at the broader concepts rather than drilling down. I get so obsessed sometimes in videos about the minute details of each particular camera. It's quite nice to take a bit of a step back and look at the bigger picture a little.
Yeah, think about the creative side, but it's been fantastic. It's awesome to answer some questions as well and hear about ice creams as well as cameras.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, I hope Video Exploit, you enjoyed your 99.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me. Let's do this again sometime. And thank you so much, everyone at home, for watching. This is going to be available to watch after the fact. So if you missed the beginning, don't worry, you can catch up with it later. And of course, if you want to buy any of the products or just talk to the sales team, head over to proav.co.uk and talk to our sales team there, and we can help you out. So yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you once again, Craig, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.
Cheers.
From a creative point of view, it's unquestionably unlocking more creative avenues for us as filmmakers.
XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/xswd.